The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, just waiting a few more minutes for people to join us, and we'll start with our presentation. Okay, so I think it's time to start. I see most of the attendees are here, and a few more are still joining. Okay, so welcome again, everybody. I'm Davide Mortillaro, Technical Support Specialist, and today here with me I have G. Roulen, also Technical Support Specialist from the Tech Support team for installation and licensing. And today we are going to discuss the new single user licensing component that has been introduced with version 2020. So starting from 2020, we have a new license component that is installed with our software, and we're going to see, we already introduced it a little bit more already we gave an overview back in June, but we are going over it again briefly, just for those of you who don't had the chance to participate to our last webinar. And then we're going to see a little bit of a troubleshooting of the common issues that are presented with version 2020. Okay, so as always, the format of this webinar is to give a little bit of presentation with our slide deck, and we're going to do also a little demo, but also as well to answer any question that might come up during the presentation, or even at the end we allocated some time for a Q&A. As always, you can learn about the upcoming webinars from this link right below. As a side note, this presentation will be shared with you later after the webinar in a follow-up email. You will have a link to the presentation. You can access this content that you're seeing right now. So again, you have a link to see the overview of the past webinars and the upcoming ones. And you can, of course, subscribe to the webinar, GoToWebinar platform to be always notified of upcoming webinars. And also, we have created a YouTube channel only dedicated to installation and licensing topics. So feel free to check it out. And as always, feel free to subscribe. Okay, let's jump right into it. Like as a brief overview, as I was saying, with version 2020, we've introduced a new licensing component that differs from the previous versions. So this new licensing component is called ADSK licensing. It covers both the single user licensing, but also the multi-user licensing, so the so-called network license. We are going to focus mainly on single user troubleshooting. We're going to present the multi-user part of it in one of the upcoming webinars. But just to say that it basically replaces the technology that stands behind the whole licensing of our software, of our Autodesk software. So it's been released for all the 2020 versions, so starting with AutoCAD, then Revit, 3ds Max, and so on. All the software that support single user subscription are coming with this component. So what this component does, it's of course improves the workflow for activation and the technology that is behind the whole authentication of the license, and also introduces new debugging capabilities. So during installation time, but also for troubleshooting, as we will see in a few minutes. The important thing to know is that the licensing component is always being updated. So far have been released 4 updates since the introduction with version 2020 back in April. And these updates are released from the Autodesk account, the desktop app, or also our knowledge network directly. Those are updates that can be installed separately from the program itself. So it's good practice to always keep the component up to date, to have it the latest version that fixes previous issues and introduces new features. Another important component that has been introduced with 2020, not really new, but it's been renewed, reworked to work with our licensing component, ADSK licensing. It's the ADSSO, which is the login framework, login technology that is linked both with the software, your Autodesk account, and the licensing. So it keeps everything together, and it's an important part of license authentication for the customers. As with the Autodesk licensing component, the ADSSO is also separately updated. So there are updates that are also pushed through the Autodesk account at the desktop app. So always keep an eye on those when they appear in your Autodesk desktop app or account. So there are a few things to remember when we start looking into what the Autodesk licensing component is built with. We have now what happens is when we install the software, we have this desktop licensing service appearing in your system. So the desktop licensing service need to run at all times to have the software talking with the not only with our server for license validation, but also with the agent itself that is installed on the machine. So important, this is an important item, and there are a few folders that have changed. If you're familiar with the old licensing component, these folders have changed a little bit. So in the past, we would look at program data, FlexNet folder, and so on. Now these are not used anymore. What we're looking at are specific ADSK licensing service folder inside program data, and the component itself is installed under program files, 86, common files, Autodesk shared ADSK licensing. So this would be the folder where it gets installed. And we're going to see this in just a minute in our demo. Another important aspect of it, it's the licensing install helper, and this allows us to check if the licensing is working properly, if the service is running on our machine, if the product is registered with that service, and if all the correct information are stored in our storage data file. Also gives us the possibility to manually register the software to reset our license. If you remember in the past, we would need to delete a few files to reset the license for a single user software. Now it's done only with just a simple command through command line or PowerShell or terminal, depending on the operating system we are working on. And this is also another important aspect. The install helper is very useful regardless of which operating system we are on. It works on Windows, it works on Mac, it works on Linux. It's multi-platform, and depending on the software, we can regardless of the software, we can work with it seamlessly cross platform. Okay, so let's move on. So if you're familiar a little bit with version 2020, there are two main issues that we will be presented with when started rolling out the software. So these are the two main ones. So we have license checkout timeout. This is the main error that comes up when the license component is not working properly. So it's, let's say, an umbrella error that it's just a symptom of one of the components of ADSK licensing that is not working correctly. I've linked here the knowledge base article, but we're gonna also see what to check and how to proceed when this error comes up. Now here comes the tricky part. Sometimes the customer or the user is worried that this means that their license expired, and that's not the case. It's just that the licensing service is not working properly on their machine. So we need to move to troubleshoot that issue. Most of the time, it's not related to their account, to their contract, none of that. It's just a local issue that we need to resolve on their machines. And the bottom one, it's an installation error. This comes up when sometimes the licensing component that gets installed during the software installation is not really applied properly. It could be a permission issue. It could be that there are some prerequisites that are interfering with the installation. And in that case, we need to move a little bit differently, and we need to act differently to troubleshoot that issue. They're a bit different because one appears at installed time. So first time the user installs the software will be presented with this error message. If the software is already installed, you will get the top error message, license checkout. So we're gonna see these two in detail. So when we are presented with one of these errors, there are 5 steps that I like always to highlight, and these needs to be followed in order. So as we've seen, we have the ADSK licensing service running in the background. So we need to check that. But before we check that, we need to make sure that whether we are on the latest update for ADSK licensing. So we need to check if this is true, if the update is installed, if we are on the latest version. I'm going to show that in a second. Then we need to check if the service is running. So the update is there. Is the service running? If yes, then we need to move forward. If not, we need to make sure if it's running properly. If the service is running, is the software registered with the service? Sometimes it happens that we have the update already in place, but the software is not actually registered with the service. And here is where the installation helper comes into help for us. If all is good, then we need to move to ADSSO. Is the ADSSO working? One good way to test that is to check if the ADSSO is properly installed. If there are important registry keys to check, we're going to check those in a second. And if, for example, if you open the desktop app, are you able to log in through that? So if it's working, then most likely it's not the ADSSO. So as said, ADSSO is a login functionality that is shared among all the Autodesk applications. So it will work for the desktop app, it will work for the software, and so that's one thing that we can check pretty easily. And another important aspect is antivirus and firewall. This is very important. It cannot be stressed enough. Make sure that your antivirus is not interfering. It can interfere with the installation. It can interfere with the service running in the background. Make sure that that is properly disabled, and once it's re-enabled, make sure that it's not interfering with the ADSK licensing folder. Okay, so let's have a look at our demo. So what I'm going to show you is a test machine, and we're going to check what we just described in our previous slide. Okay, so here's our test machine. I have already installed AutoCAD 2020. I also have AutoCAD 2019, 16, 17, just so we can compare what's the difference. So as you remember, what I mentioned is it's important to check the installation folder of our licensing. I'm sorry, I just need to switch back. Okay, there you go. The installation main folder of our licensing. So just navigate there. So it's usually on our C drive. I'll just go through step by step so it's easier to follow. It's under Common Files, Autodesk Shared, and this is this new folder. This is where our licensing component is installed. Once we open here, we are presented with the component files. The most important thing to notice is always this folder here. This folder is basically the version of our licensing component. So that means that we are right now on version 9.2.1. So an easy check is to see if this is the actual latest version. So what I usually do is to go into my Autodesk account. And we can check if we are actually on our latest version. So it's usually listed under product updates, and the same update is also shown into our desktop app. So I'm just showing the various options where to check that. It may take some time to load. Okay, while it's loading in the background, let's check our desktop app. So it's usually shown here. We can see that we have a single sign-on component update that is pending, and a number of updates for AutoCAD as well. So it's not showing me the licensing service, so that might be needed a resync. If we go back to our account for licensing, and it's not appearing. Let's see. Okay, need to load. There you go. Okay, so the licensing component is here. This is the latest update, is version 9.2.2.2501. If we go to click release notes, it should take us to the knowledge base article where you can find the actual download. So from either the account or the knowledge base article or the desktop app again, you can see if a new update is being installed. The good thing about the desktop app is that it automatically detects if there are new updates available or not. In this case, it's saying that there are no updates. Probably my desktop app is not really syncing because something's wrong with my entitlement, but no worries about that. So current version is 9.2.2, and we are on 9.2.1. So this is one thing that we need to make sure. Just install the installer and have it here. Okay, so this is easy one. I just need to extract it. There you go. One thing is important. If we go to properties for this file, sometimes for exe file Windows, especially Windows 10, is basically block these files for security purposes. So we need to go to properties and block it. And then we just run the installation. So depending on the user we have, we may want to run this installation as administrator. If there are permission issues, we want to make sure those are not interfering with the installation. And also check if there is any antivirus running in the background. Right now, I only have Windows Defender it's usually pretty harmless, it's not interfering with the installation. So I just go ahead and install it. So while it's installing, you will see populating here the new folder. There you go, it's appearing, 9.2.2. Okay, I'm seeing that the audio is not really working very well. I'm sorry for that. I will increase a little bit. Just bear with me for a second. Okay, can you confirm if you can hear me well? Just a quick test. Since some users are not able to hear me well. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, thank you for confirming. Okay, so let's back to it. So we have installed version 9.2.2. So all looks good. What I like to do is usually go to the temp folder and check the installation log. You would see the ADSK licensing install log here. And usually I scroll all the way to the bottom. If I see a script exit code 0, it means the installation was successful. If there are any issues during installation, the installer won't show an error. So the way to double check if the installation worked is to go and have a look in the installation log. So if you have an error here, you would see the details of the error. It's pretty clear. It's human readable. The development team did a great job to make this clear to understand. So you would see an error here, but if you see a 0, it means that the installation went okay. An important aspect to notice is that if we go back to our installation folder, you would also see here a link called current. This is just a symbolic link that basically takes us always to the latest version that we have installed. So every time we run the installation, this link is updated. It will take us to the 9.2.2 content of that of our license component. So you see it's the same, but we can make sure that we are going here from the current folder. So we're always on the latest version. So one step back, here we have our the container folder. Basically, a component is comprised of the agent, the service, and the installation helper. Here, there is not much to say. This is these are files that we don't usually touch. We don't need these much, but what we do need is the helper. So the helper, if you run the helper, it wouldn't do anything. It doesn't have any GUI, but we need to access from the command line. We're going to see this in a few seconds. So we have installed our update. We can easily check our services. Let me close it so I can show you how to access it. Okay, that's my bad. So services is here. So in the services window, If you scroll down, you would see the desktop licensing service. This is the service we were mentioning. We have, it's usually set to automatic, so it will start at boot time, and it should always running in the background. So we have covered that we are on the latest update. We are checking if the service is running as well. Now, what we need to do is to go and check if the install helper is working properly and if the software is registered. So usually go for CMD. You can also use PowerShell, whatever you're comfortable with. And important thing is to run it as administrator. So what I do is just move to the folder where our helper is located. And then what the command we need to run depends on what we want to do. So usually if you want to just check if the licensing service is running and if the software is registered with the service, we need to type the command adsk licensing install helper.exe, then list, and the output we get from this command is basically the software that we have installed on this machine and whether or not it's been registered. So right now we can see that we have AutoCAD 2020 registered. Is pretty easy to recognize. We have the product key that the software has been registered with, the version, of course, 2020. The selected product key, this is a little bit more complicated. You would see a different value here if, for example, AutoCAD was installed from a suite. So you would see the default product key here, which is AutoCAD's product key, and the suite product key down here. You don't need to worry about this because all this information is automatically registered at install time. When you install AutoCAD, the installer will register this for you. We can see if which licensing method we have here. Number 4 usually means that it's single user license, and whether or not there are licensing service. In this case, we don't have servers because we are on single user, and a whole bunch of other information that we don't really need to worry about. The key here is really to see if the software is registered and whether we are getting this output. So if you have AutoCAD 2020, this is exactly what we're expecting. If the service is not running, so let's say if I go here, right? If I go back to my service and let's say it's not running for a reason, it could be an antivirus that is interfering, that is not letting the service running, or it could be a firewall, it could be an anti-malware that is blocking the service. Let's say we stop it. We go back here and we try to run it, the same command we did before. We are not getting anything. So the install helper is trying to contact the service, is trying to contact the agent to get those information, what is actually on our system, but it's not getting anything. So the install helper to work needs to have the service running. So this is already a symptom. If you're troubleshooting with the helper and you don't see any output coming out in the command prompt, it means that the service is not running properly. Let's do the opposite. You can see here that there is no connection to the service. So if I run again the service is running. Again, the command, again, we have our information. So this is important. You might wonder where this information is stored. This is pretty simple. Remember previous version 2019, 2018, we had those folder in program data, FlexNet, publisher. This is rather different. So let's check it together. So we go to program data. Let's go to C drive program data, Autodesk. We have this new folder. It's called ADSK Licensing Service. In the past, we will have Flexed folder. I have it here because I still have 2019, 2017 installed. I haven't launched it, so it's basically empty. But we would usually go here to remove the storage data of our license. Now, it's all stored into Autodesk Licensing Service. And these are the files that where our licensing information is stored. Most importantly, inside the file SDS. So if we were to remove the file SDS, or if the file SDS is corrupted, we won't get this information here. So this is important. Now, one thing that is important, if you want to reset the license, we don't recommend to remove this folder or these files. There is a different way to reset the license that I'm going to show you in a few seconds. Just to show you that the information is stored here. And before we move to that, I want to show you another thing. We have a data file here. This data file basically includes the information on how the licensing service is connecting to the agent, and this is done through the local host. You can see our loopback address right here that is connected to this port. Now, sometimes the firewall can interfere and can block this port. So an easy way to check is to check if this port is open. If this port is not open, the service in the background cannot run. So we will get another error here that the service cannot be run. There is an easy way to check. I usually take this address, go to my browser, and just simply paste it. And you will get this message if the service is running. It will tell you on which port is actually running. So this is another check that can be done related to the service. So again, let's go back to our folder. As we were saying, these are the storage license file, license information. This is where all the information of our software is stored. Another thing to notice is that later this folder can be populated by the LGS folder. If you remember also from previous versions, under CLM LGS, we will get the folder corresponding to each product we have on our computer, and you can recognize it from the product key. These were stored under CLM LGS, but with with versions 2020, these folders will be saved here. Right now, I didn't start AutoCAD, so I don't have this LGS folder here. So let's do a test. Let's say we need to reset our license. We are changing our license from multi-user to single user or the other way around, and we need to reset our license. Perhaps we cannot access our software, or we don't have the software accessible in a way. So in this case, we need to go back to our install helper. And you remember the command we used before? We call again the helper, but this time the command will be different. So this will be the syntax. So install helper, change. And then we need to provide the product key. And to do that, we need to do -pk. The product key for our product is right here. So it will be 001 L1. We need to give also the product version, which is this one here. So it will be 2020.0. Oh, sorry about that. 0.0.f. And another thing we need to provide is the license method flag. So we need to reset this flag specifically. We cannot just go ahead and reset the flag without providing a product key. Otherwise, the command doesn't work. It needs to be specific for a product. So it will be -lm. And to give it an empty value, we provide a quotation mark. So 1, 2 quotation marks. And this is the syntax, and we hit enter. So that means the command It's been submitted. So if we run the list command again, we can see that our license method value is gone. So we had license method 4, which is single user. Now it's gone. That means that if we run AutoCAD now, we'll be presented with our LGS screen. Let's give it a go. Okay, the software started, and there you go. We have our Let's Get Started screen. So if we go ahead and select single user, okay, in my case, it automatically picked up my username because I'm already logged in from the desktop app. So you see, this is a really, remember the ADSSO I mentioned before? The ADSSO is storing this login information, and it automatically detects that we already logged in the desktop app. We don't need to submit again our username and password. So if we go back to our helper now and we run the same command again, you can see that we selected single user license method, which is value 4. Another way of more user-friendly way to reset the license is if you have access to your software and just click on your username, manage license, change license type, and you're presented again with Let's Get Started screen. So if you remember in the past, you had to close down the product and then reopen it to get this window again, but now it's all live. You can do it. You can switch pretty easily. All right, so this basically covers more or less the install helper, and these are the most important steps to see and to troubleshoot, especially the error we've seen before a license checkout. Again, if service is running, it's important to check it, check it with the install helper, and see if there is any antivirus or firewall involved. Okay, I see some questions are coming in already. That's good. So one user is asking, will there be a new UI for the license helper in the future? And we are right now. I don't have an answer to that. I know that the development team wants to make it more user-friendly, especially for debugging purposes. But right now the focus is really on improving the licensing component itself. So I would say that doesn't have much priority right now, but down the line we are thinking of improving the UI of the install helper. Okay, so another thing I wanted to show you is this ADSSO component. So the ADSSO component is usually sitting under program files, Autodesk ADSSO. This is the component that really lets us log in with our username and password. Once we log in, the server responds that our login is valid. It will talk to our licensing component on our machine, and the licensing component will validate the entitlement and will open the software. So it's really linked with the licensing and the authentication of our user. It is also important to have it updated. So an easy way to check this is go to control panel, and we can check the version real quick. Here we be shown as single sign-on component, and under version you would see that we are right now on version 10.22. So let's go check again our desktop app. And there is actually a new version. It's version 11. This is pretty easy to update. Just click update and it will download and install everything. So this is important because the latest version of the SSO is introducing new features for login authentication. So it's important to also be on the latest version. One thing to notice, so maybe I'll go back to our licensing component knowledge article. You may want to bookmark if you're facing these issues pretty often, or with your customer or with your users. You may want to bookmark this page because it's really important. It's going to be updated with the new version of the component every time it's released. Now, I believe that end of this month or perhaps next month, a new update is scheduled. So keep an eye on this page, and you will see the new version will be released down below. You may see a difference in version between Windows version and the Mac/Linux version. Right now on Mac we are on version 9.2.1. So just to let you know that if you see here there is not the same, just don't worry. It's just right now is not released yet. So it's constantly updated by us support team and by development team as well. So just keep an eye on that. Okay, maybe let's go back to our presentation. And as always, want to just do some advertising for our YouTube channel. As you're interested in this type of content, the YouTube channel is the channel to go for installation and licensing related questions. We constantly update the channel with new content. Support team is taking care of that, and is really high level video that you can even share with your users for installation and just for reference. So just give it a look. It's constantly being updated. And yeah, now it's time for our question. I see that there are some already coming up. Let's give it a look. Okay, okay. One of our users is asking, sometimes the user only gets the option for multi-user or activate, I suppose activate with serial number, but not the sign-in option. Yes, we've seen this scenario pretty often, and this usually happens because on the local network of the user there is a proxy server or a firewall. What happens is that the sign-in option requires to talk with our servers, and sometimes proxy really interferes with this process in the background. A symptom of this scenario is generally the sign-in button not coming up at all in the LGS screen. So you need to make sure that the software, the user is allowing traffic to our domains through their proxy or the servers. Most often than not is a firewall that is blocking the communication. Sometimes the communication, the secure traffic via HTTPS may be inspected by their proxy. It happens a lot, especially with big organizations, with banks, with insurance companies, government agencies. Sometimes they have a pretty strict security measures, so they need to check if those Autodesk domains are whitelisted in their proxy. In that case, the communication is not being interfered, and the single user will come up in the LGS screen. My colleague is just sharing with you the article that targets exactly this scenario and gives you indication of which domains need to be whitelisted. Okay, next question. Customers are asking for SSO, a single sign-on integration. Today, only EBA customers have this option. Will be available for all subscribers. I don't have full information on that. It is true, only EBA customers right now have this option. I know there are plans to expand this feature for other customers. If you want more information on that and when this will be available, I'll suggest you submit a support request with us, and we'll be happy to transfer it to the proper team. They will give you more information and also requirements, because integration of single sign-on requires also some work on customer side and their IT to integrate it properly. So we'll be happy to give you all the details. Okay, another user is asking, how does it work for network licensing? That's an answer that we plan of answering in our next webinar, so stay tuned. I will be showing also how the install helper comes into play when we have a network license. So I don't want to go too much into detail, but the workflow for the user is more or less the same as it was for 2019. What happens in the back, though, changed because the licensing component changed. So we're gonna go over that, and we'll be happy that if you could join us the next webinar. I'm not sure if there are any other questions. And as always, I mean, I may repeat myself, but I mean, Jill, my colleague here, and me, the other teammates are always happy to help you if you encounter any issues, or if the issues your customers are reporting are a little bit more difficult to troubleshoot. If you follow these steps and you still don't get the software to work, just send us a support request. We'll always be happy to help. Okay, I see there are no further questions. So I think we can wrap up this webinar, and really a great thank you for attending this webinar. We'll look forward to having you again and then the upcoming one. And always stay tuned, check the links that are included in the slide deck. You will be receiving a follow-up email in around an hour with the links to the presentation. And you have a link to really add the whole schedule of webinar we have currently and the upcoming webinars. And we hope to see you again. And we wish you really a nice day.
Thank you and welcome. Have a nice day.